Well, welcome everybody. I'm Rick Wolf with Soul Survivor Outdoor, and we are an outdoor adventure company that is focused on active duty military. And so we are serving them through Christ-centered outdoor adventure. And we have been doing this for going on 10 years. And I'm sitting down here with our area director from Colorado, Randy Garcia. And we are picking up as a part 2 from a previous podcast that we did. And we want to talk about some of the partnerships that we have, with all the different things that we're doing. We have vendors that we're partnered with. We have volunteers. It's just a whole network. Again, we talk heavily about relationship with all that we do, and that's a key thing. And so I just wanted to pass the ball off to you and, let you jump in on that one, because I know you were wanting to share about what those partnerships with those various folks looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking about in the last podcast about the spark and that spreads. And we spoke specifically about active duty military and how that has become the place where we see that fire spreading. But I think there's other places we see that as well. We have the volunteer network that just come alongside us and say, hey, I can spend a morning and afternoon at doing an SSO event. Some of those volunteers are former military. Right. Some of them are retired military. Some of them are active duty. They're still in and they said, hey, I've done this before. I'd like to volunteer. Some have never been in the military, but they're big partners of ours. I know Brian here has done some of the surfing events. So it's really good to see that. And, I think specifically to Colorado, what's encouraging to me is how it kind of snowballs across the organization. So I think at Noah's Ark or whitewater rafting out in Buena Vista, or Buena Vista if you live in Buena Vista. So Noah's Ark whitewater rafting, very strong Christian organization, Christian founded, and it's almost like summer ministry for them. Right. They get a lot of post-college kids from across the country, and they learn how to do just top-notch whitewater rafting guiding. They have a very rigorous process they go through to become guides. And as part of that, the Noah's Ark team will actually pray before an event. And they'll say, God, this is a beautiful day that you've given us out here in Colorado, out here in the Arkansas River. And then also afterwards, I think of my friend Spencer LaValle. He was our guide for our first chili event this year that we had. We kind of broke through the snow of Woodland Park on our way to go whitewater rafting. We didn't know what we were going to see on the other side of the divide there. But it was really, really nice to kind of tag team with that and be an encouragement to that partner for them to see that and then see how they can contribute to the event. The other things we see is they use a similar technique that we do in drawing people out. One of the things we say when we show up to an event and we talk to our volunteers is, hey, we got numbers on a roster, and every number has a name, but every name has a story. Go find out what that story is. And so our volunteers will do that and do a lot of listening. And a lot of these folks just haven't been listened to and been able to tell their story. Right. Some people look funny at you like, oh, my story. You want me to tell my story? Okay, nobody's asked me that before. Well, in the same way, we'll be on an event, this zip line event that we did this past week with Adventures Out West in Manitou was it was great. And they were doing the same thing. They're talking to folks about, hey, what do they like? What's your favorite music? What's this? What's your first name? Having a really good time, just kind of drawing people out and really appreciating them. So they... one of the lead guys on the zip line, George, is retired Special Forces, and he's like, this is so great to be able to give back to these folks that are active duty. And I didn't have anything like this when I was active duty. This is so cool that you guys are doing this. So having those high-end commercial partners that we do high adventure with, it's not Randy out there tying knots and whatnot. It's somebody who knows what they're doing. So it's fun to partner with those. I think the other one, just as a segue, is we've got active duty Marines that are believers, that are Christians, that kind of feel downtrodden. Hey, I've got this faith that it's kind of been squelched. I kind of feel on the defensive. Hey, it was really encouraging, Rick, to hear you talk at Bourbon Brothers and tell about this, because that's what I believe. And I'm so excited that you're able to tell these other folks that I work with that. I remember that one staff sergeant we talked to there.
Oh, yeah.
He was so encouraged. He just really had a good time. That was after that broom ball event. And then, I think the last is our volunteers. We could not do what we do without the volunteers that come out to the events. And I tell you, it's not a huge commitment. I remember I got started with SSO just volunteering. Right. And I know you needed somebody 3 days in a row. I was able to do one. And you had other folks come in the other days. Right. Yep. And so, having people who have a morning free, an afternoon free, a day free, being able to come out and help. And it's everything from, the logistics of getting food and water and things like that out to the events. And again, most importantly, just talking to people, learning their stories. And I tell you, those volunteers leave that going, this was a good thing. I am so glad I did this. I think of Eddie Jackson's daughter, Soraya. She came out and did the zip lining with us. First time she had ever gone.
wow.
And she was out serving chow to the soldiers afterwards. She was talking with them during the zip lining event and all that. And she was very grateful at the end of the day. And I know it's the old saying, better to give than receive. And I think we see that as the volunteers walk away from events.
Yeah, the whole partnerships with everybody that you just mentioned is so critical and important. And the curious thing in terms of seeing how God is leading it is it could be Noah's Ark in Colorado with Rob, who's the owner there, who I've talked to, or it could be the family up in Cascade, Idaho, with Cascade Raft and Kayak, another Christian family with a huge whitewater rafting operation, because both those companies are putting hundreds, thousands of people through whitewater rapids throughout the summer and spring and what have you. Then there's Brazos Bluffs Ranch in Waco, Texas, another Christian family with thousands of acres of ranch and 20, 30, 40 horses and the ability to do that. And we've been going back there and that's a partner that on Friday we get an invoice from them and we pay it. And on Monday, we go to our mailbox, and there's a check for 3 times the amount of the invoice that we paid to them on Friday, and it's from them. So they invoiced us on Friday, but they donated on Monday.
Wow.
And that's a true story. And so there's so many things like that are going on. And then some of the organizations that aren't necessarily even they're not Christian organizations. We've got a rock climbing outfit that we have in Joshua Tree, and and that's a subculture of rock climbing and some of the things that we do. People are really into the thing that they do. Surfers, rock climbers, different stuff. It's like that's their thing, and that's what they gravitate around. That's all they ever talk about. That's what they do. And we might not ever have an opportunity. In fact, we would not have that opportunity to share the love of Christ with that vendor if we met them on the street. But because we've been a partner with them for 10 years, there's an ongoing relationship, and Christ being poured into that relationship over time.
Yeah.
In Tennessee is a horseback riding ranch where Richard went up there to just do that pre-liaison stuff and figure out, is this a place that we can use? And they had plenty of horses, and the lady who's the owner made the appointment with him, and he showed up for the appointment, and she was available. But she said, I actually forgot about your appointment this morning. And he said, oh, okay, why's that? And she said, well, who takes 40 soldiers out and pays for everything and does this? And he said, well, we do. And she was like, why? And he said, because we're a Christian organization, we want to pour Christ in their lives. We want to help them have a firm foundation for living. And she said, oh my gosh, we're Christians too. We're going to get behind you guys and support this. And come meet my dad, who's 91 years old, and he's a Korean War vet. He's a combat vet from Army, from Vietnam. So then, of course, he and Richard hit it off because they're two Army brethren talking separate wars, but, both having served in the Army and a Christian family. And then these volunteers that are coming out, we have, most of the volunteers who don't want to skydive. Well, they'll go to the rock climbing, and the surfing, sailing, some other kind of thing that they want to do. So it's like, so they're being able to align an affinity with the thing that they're willing to do. If they say, well, I'm not going to jump out of a plane, it's like, well, then join in on one of our other events, because we do lots of fun things, and you're going to be able to share with these service members. And then, my wife has commented that when you get to have those discussions, like you said, behind the number is a name, behind the name is a story. And then when you say, well, hi, who are you? And they usually say something like Smith. And you're like Smitty? Like that's your first name, your nickname? And they're like, no, that's my last name. You're like, what's your first name? Well, that puts them in shock right there. And they're like, Roberto. Oh, okay. Great. Roberto, how are you doing? Where are you from? And then they're in shock because you asked, and you actually cared. And so you've got a volunteer and who's asking them about their life and where are they from and taking an interest and breaking down those barriers. And that's why, they can go from coming to an event where they're all guarded and they're so, they're not really sharing. And you're like, you tell a joke and maybe it actually was funny, but no one laughs because they're just so serious in the morning. And then by the end of the day, they're slapping high fives. They're so interested and engaged. And then the volunteers are like, oh my gosh, wow, I got to share with this one service member, and we had some common things going on in our lives. And then this volunteer is coming to tears because of how God used them in the situation with this soldier, or this Marine or sailor or coastie or something. And it's like, man, who wouldn't want to volunteer for that, right? I need to take a few hours out of my day. I don't need to prep for weeks in advance. I don't need to know a sermon. Of course, if they're our guest speaker, they probably need to be a little bit more prepared. But they can come out there and just have a good time, break down those barriers, be friendly, and really pour into the lives of these service members. And so those partnerships are so critical. And then the donor, of course. We don't do anything without the giving, and that's huge too. So every single one of these partnerships is so important. And I don't know that I don't think people necessarily understand that as well as they should. And you said, we don't do this without the teams and the volunteers and stuff, because we're not professional whitewater rafters. We're not professional skydiving instructors. We're not professional rock climbing people, who have climbed Everest, and they're leading us through some little thing in Ouray, Colorado, right? Like, no big deal for them.
Yeah, world class.
Right. But, and so those partnerships and just amazing. Again, we just keep saying, it's interesting that, we pick a verse like, what's your favorite verse? Well, I guess Soul Survivors is, Matthew 11:28, come to me all. And God really means all. And it's the vendors, it's the service member, it's the volunteer, it's the donor, it's everybody. And so anyway, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, you hit on donors. And I think it's pretty, I think the donors need to hear what people say. And I think the biggest thing I hear is people paid for this, for us to do this. I think there's a shock because on the bases, sometimes there's a special services, outdoor rec trip, and you may pay money, or there may be a single Marine program or something like that.
Right.
And so that's kind of sponsored overhead by the government. But to have individual and organizational contributors say, hey, I'm all in, whether it's the little lady that does $25 a month to the organizations that are in the thousands of dollars, that these soldiers look at us and go, you mean somebody just liked us enough to invest in this? And we said, yeah, absolutely. We really want your feedback. If we did it well, let us know, write us a good review. If we didn't do something well, let us know how we can tweak it and get better. And the donors people are blown away by the investment that our donors have made in SSO and to do events like this. And the gratitude that comes out, I don't think everybody 100% of the folks don't do the feedback things, but I think the donors, I wish they would all get a chance to come volunteer and see the faces and the gratitude and the people that say, hey, thanks so much. There's not a person who left last Thursday from our zipline event that did not thank all 5 of the volunteers and just say, this was one of the best things that I've done. And you get a little choked up. It's like, wow, look at the impact that we had on these folks. And the message they heard was just powerful. So I'm just so grateful for the donors that have helped us get as far as we've gotten today. It just keeps growing. Yeah, and you mentioned Brian Darcy. He's been on our leadership team for a number of years, and he's an avid outdoorsman. But he has stood there so many different times and said, here's what we need you to know as much as anything we will tell you today is people care. And it's one thing to say, when somebody, because we've all heard it as military service members, thank you for your service, right? And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, you're welcome. And then somebody who's a giving partner is saying, thank you for your service. And I really care deeply about you. And I care so much that I'm going to write a check, right? We have a gal up in LA who writes Philippians 4:19 on every check that she sends. And so that woman cares deeply about these service members. We share that, and Brian's really good about it. He doesn't usually forget. He says, hey, we've got all of you here, 20, 30, 40 people getting ready to do whatever that activity is. You need to know that somebody else cared enough to, write a check, to be, this is not a solicitation of a donation from a service member. This is just to let you know, do not walk away from a Soul Survivor outdoor event knowing that you are cared for by not just the people that are represented here, but literally hundreds of other individuals who have, who are working hard and they're investing their dollars
because they care so much about you. And so I think that really is communicated, and we do a pretty good job of doing that across the board. And certainly volunteers and vendors and everybody else, they're class A, and the reviews are outstanding because we go way out of our way to make sure that every one of these things is top notch. And it doesn't mean we never have any challenges, you know, but it means that we're going to do our absolute best to make it a 5-star event. And that's the feedback that we're getting. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up because it's so critical and if every donor could get out and see what's happening, truly, it is a believing, seeing is a believing scenario when they go, oh my gosh, look at the impact that we're having on the service members. So
that's good. There are a lot of good veteran organizations out there.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have had this discussion, and we've had this discussion in talks. I have lost more friends post-military to suicide than I ever lost in combat and in active duty time. And that's a sad state. And I think when you look at Soul Survivor Outdoor, if you're not contributing to donate to or donating to Soul Survivor now, what's one of the compelling things I see? And you talked about it earlier. Hey, we work with active duty military. Right. So these are people who are in now. It might be 4 years. It might be 10 years. They may do 20 years. But these are people that are in the crucible of that routine of being in the military and deployments and the stress that comes along with that. The second is we're giving them the spiritual resilience skills now to deal with challenges as they come up. It might be the next deployment. It might be the drinking that's going on in the barracks. It might be depression, anxiety. Yep. We're trying to give them those skills today in the here and now so that when they cross that line into being a veteran and leaving the military, they've got those skills and that resilience so that they can take on those challenges, like some of the guest speakers will talk to us about. And so when you have $1 and you give it to an organization like Soul Survivor Outdoor, that $1 makes a lot of impact on here and now active duty military.
That's right.
That I truly believe is getting in front of that veteran suicide issue. And you don't see a lot of that today. You don't see a lot of that investment in our current active duty military. So that's pretty compelling. I know that drew Jennifer and I to Soul Survivor Outdoor all up front when we first started giving. And I'm a believer. So I think that's something that's really compelling to those who are looking, hey, where should I be investing my money? I think SSO is a good place to do that.
Well, it's definitely harder to fix things after they're broken than it is to go after it in the beginning. And, and again, we talked about this already, but Jesus saying, firm foundation, that's one outcome. Having sand, that's a completely different outcome. And so, getting ahead of that and helping them to be prepared for the challenges that they face both on and off the battlefield. So, thanks for stopping in and talking to me today and sharing about what's been going on in your neck of the woods and your perspective on partnerships. So, thanks, Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
You bet. Talk to you next time.
Been a pleasure.
All right, thanks.